morning. I'm Stephanie and welcome to Northfarthing Farm on the first clear, bright day we've had in weeks. So I wanted to take this opportunity before hopefully it doesn't start raining again in the next few days to introduce you to myself and the farm and capture a moment in time for myself on where this place is before I start turning it into the homestead that I hope it could be. There's a number of different sections to the farm, so let me introduce you to them one by one. First off, we have the house. This house was built in 1853 on the site of what had previously been a hammer factory in the early 1800s. It has gone through several owners. About 15 years ago, it was rehabbed completely and used as an Airbnb for a while. And for the past 7 years, it's been held by a family of 7 and part of a cattle raising endeavor. They decided that the property was too small for the number of cattle that they wanted to raise. So they've moved on and I've taken over the place. I also count this back section as part of the house. At the moment, there's not much going on here. There's a little slate patio there. And at the moment, I have the wood pile there, which I didn't use as much of this winter as I had expected to, but that's a me issue, not a fire issue. There's some work that still needs to be done on the house, but I've spent most of the past few months getting the interior set up the way that I would like it for my own personal aesthetic. Previous owners kept the house pretty spare and easy to clean when you have 5 kids in such a small house, and it's a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom house. You kind of keep things basic so that it's not as much work to maintain. But I like a little more color and pizzazz in my house, so that's what I've been working on this winter. Again, it still needs some work. It needs gutters added. I need to replace a couple of windows, but nothing that can't be done slowly over time. This back area, I'm also considering other things that I might want here. I would love to have a wood-fired hot tub out here. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but that's on the wish list. And I'm trying to decide whether I want to extend the driveway from here on around along the house and out to the shed area. And the shed area we'll talk more about when we get to the farmyard section, which is up next. So the farmyard consists of a couple of different zones, most of which aren't terribly established yet, but should be in the next couple of weeks. So first off, we have the shed. It's a very small shed with a little run-in area, and then this section the previous owners were using as a chicken coop. My plans for it are to get that all cleaned out and turn it into a small rabbitry. And I have a 10 by 20 foot shed coming, which is going to go along here to give me additional storage out here. The previous owners also had goats, which were penned in here. The soil here is very rocky, so I need to figure out what I'm going to do with this area. I may use that as part of an extended chicken run. I may just seed it over. I haven't decided on that yet. Feel free to make any suggestions if you have ideas. The other thing that the previous owners took with them, which surprised me and my realtor, is there was a small shed here that they were using as a playhouse for their children. So this needs to get cleaned up and reseeded so that that can be grass. Over in this area, marked out by the purple flags, is going to be my chicken coop. At the same time that I have the shed coming, I have an 8x10 chicken coop coming. That is intended initially, I have 20 chickens coming at the end of May from Murray McMurray Hatchery, and I can't wait to share that with you because I haven't had chickens in a number of years. The ones I had were illegal and I didn't get to keep them on my house very long. But so that is going to go here. And again, I'm trying to decide how big a run they're going to need and what kinds of things I want included in that run area. But that's all here. And you can see there's a stream running along this edge here, and that goes up to the pond area. It's not always an active stream. It all depends on our rainfall. Currently, the last few weeks, it's been running pretty heavily. But at the moment, well, we still have some flow coming through. And part of this season is going to be watching that and see what that does over the course of time and how that changes through the seasons. At the moment, the most significant part of the farmyard for me is the garden. This garden pre-exists me. It is 35 feet by 55 feet, but it was not maintained last year. The owners, because they knew they were selling and moving, didn't put a lot of effort into it. So it's pretty heavily weeded or full of weeds, and needs some serious maintenance. So this is my immediate project. It's late in the season. Again, because of all the rain that we've had the last few weeks, I haven't been able to get in and do the soil amending and such that I wanted to do. So now we're already well into the season here in upstate New York. So I'm really behind the gun. I have compost coming tomorrow and hopefully another load coming later in the week. And I'm hoping to get somebody to come out, and once I have all of that, get it all tilled in. Ideally, I want to go to a no-till garden just because it's just me and I'm of a certain age. Having to run a rototiller every year is a lot of work for me, and I'd rather not have to deal with it. But because of the state of the garden this year, I do feel like I need to just turn it over and then start clean and be able to keep ahead of the weeds instead of having to try and recover from them. A couple of pleasant surprises that I got when I started exploring out here this spring. There is a line of 4 apple trees along the front of the property here. Unfortunately, the deer always knew that those were there. So one job that I have is I need to get those deer fenced and protected. The other big job I'm going to have is fencing in the main garden to keep the deer out of that. Additionally, over here, there were 2 elderberry plants already put in by the previous homeowner. And these are all they're either blackberry or black raspberry canes. The tag that was on them was broken, so I wasn't able to correctly identify them, but I believe they're black raspberries. They, for some reason, had been in the main garden, so this winter, while they were still dormant, I moved them over onto the embankment there with the elderberries, which A, should help protect the elderberries from the deer, and B, we'll see what they do, and hopefully I'll get blackberries out of that. And at the far end of the garden, there are 3 blueberry bushes. They are very small, so I don't know if they are brand new, that the previous owners put them in shortly before they decided to sell the house, or if they've been eaten down. So at the moment, I'm considering whether I want to move them and start doing some kind of permaculture tree guild with the apple trees at the front of the property, or if I'm just going to leave those where they are, capture them inside the garden fence and let that be part of that growing area. So those are all questions that we are going to explore together over the next months and years. On the other side of the creek is what I've been calling the Upper Pasture. Again, like with the Farmyard area, this is in multiple zones, and I'll show you those as we go through. Right now, I'm in kind of the lower zone. There's the bridge that goes over by the sheds. This is the easiest to access from the house. This flat area here by the creek is going to be my apiary. I have bees coming at the beginning of May, which are going to get set up here in the next week or two. I'll walk you through that with me as I'm setting those up. I want to keep this area fairly open. As I get established and learn my capabilities as a homesteader, as an older single homesteader, I don't want to take on too much, but I would like to have a couple of fiber sheep. And I also have considered whether or not I would like to raise kune pigs, because they're smaller, they're not as destructive as some of the more common, the larger meat breeds. I could then use this lower part of the upper pasture to use as pasture for those animals. So for right now, I am going to just keep this mowed and possibly seed it with wildflowers as I'm able to. As far as mowing goes, the cows were run through here, and the previous owner did also have a couple of pigs, which were kept in the woods down to this end of the upper pasture. So the soil here is very uneven and difficult to navigate, especially with a mower. So I do have an electric mower that is my youngest child's favorite toy on the property. But I'm going to have to experiment with how much of that am I able to do here myself, and am I going to need to hire somebody to come in periodically to brush hog the area. At the upper end of the pasture, again, you can see at the moment it's open grassland. My plan, and each one of these little purple flags marks where this is going to be my orchard. Again, I'm planning to try and do this using permaculture concepts. I'll do a video on the basics of permaculture as far as I understand them as a beginning permaculturist in the future. But suffice it to say that these trees are not going to be treated with a lot of pesticides. There's going to be a lot of interplanting to try and protect it from pests and from deer. There are a number of deer who travel through this area, so I may end up having to fence this whole area to keep those out. But we're going to start small. I'm only going to do 9 trees a year, 6 fruit trees and 3 nitrogen fixers. So it'll take 5 years to fill this whole section in with trees, at which point the trees that I planted in the first 2 years should be producing fruit, assuming everything goes the way we hope that it will. We go lower on the pasture and up towards the road, there's a lot of runoff that comes into that area and water that comes from the next property along. It's just a low area, which used to be dry. And 15 years ago, I have pictures of all those trees out there being green and healthy and living. But I think in that time, whether it's climate change or just changes in the landscape itself, this has become a very marshy area. And I'm working on trying to figure out ways to manage that water so that that can become useful land again. All of this is being done with consideration to how are these changes going to impact the wildlife that's already living here. There are birds here. I've seen groundhogs. I've seen fox. Obviously we're dealing with the deer. So there is wildlife in this area. There are fish in the pond, and I want to maintain the property in such a way that it still provides habitat for them while becoming useful land for us as well. So this is the line that I'm walking as we're working on this project. As should not be surprising to anyone, this is the pond area. It extends all the way up to the main road there and my road there. And it has an outflow here with a small footbridge that becomes that creek that we've seen further down the property. There are, from my understanding, the previous owners had the pond stocked with bass and would put feeder fish in for the bass. And that seems to be true because we have seen herons in fishing in the water. So that's more wildlife that I'm looking forward to seeing. There is apparently a very large snapping turtle that lives in the pond. I'm not looking forward to running into him, but I would love to get this properly stocked and healthy, so perhaps we could use this as a source of fish. I would also like to have a little dock come out so I would have a place to sit in the water and maybe go swimming. But that is all for several years down the road. You can see up here all these scrub willow bushes, which I'm trying to decide how to manage those. I am going to be planting a lot of willow on the property for use in things like fencing and perhaps doing basketry, even just selling the sticks to other weavers or as cuttings for trees. All of that is in the future. I have a couple up here on the stream as well. These are going to be my test subjects. It's very interesting. The ones on the pond are all very healthy, not much dead sticks and such in them. Whereas the ones on the creek, I went through a couple of weeks ago and cut out all the dead branches, which took about half the bulk off of the 2 bushes that I worked on. So again, I'm not sure if that's because of changes in how the water is flowing through here, if this dries up too much for them to remain healthy during the course of the winter or during the course of the summer. So again, this is things that we'll be watching over the course of the next year to decide what we're going to do with them. In either case, I will be bringing those all the way down to the ground in a process called coppicing. This is a renewable wood maintenance process which lets you use the wood of the willow or several other species of tree for practical use. Again, fencing, basketry, living structures. Willow makes great firewood. And by cutting it down to the ground, it triggers the roots to think that it is a brand new tree and it needs to start from scratch. So by maintaining it and cutting it periodically every 2 to 3 years, it reinvigorates it. So even though it looks like I may be killing these shrubs, it's actually renewing these shrubs to turn them into a valuable resource for the property. The property is what I'm calling the woods. It runs all the way down to the creek and back, and then all the way along the property line, all the way up to the road. And I did speak to the previous owner because I wasn't sure if the property line started at the bottom of the hill or at the top, and he said he was assured by the farmer next door that it's all the way to the top because that's where his barbed wire fence is. So this is all mine. I don't know what's in it yet. And that's, again, part of the process for the next year is starting to identify the trees, starting to determine which ones are still alive. Unfortunately, there are a lot of dead trees in this area, and I need to determine which ones are living and what those ones are, and then start replacing some of the dead ones. I can tell we've got some, I think this is some sort of a locust here. I'm hoping that there's some maple in here because I would love to be able to tap my own maple, but we're gonna wait and see what happens with that. For the most part, I'm gonna leave this as is. I love a good woods, and anything that I can do to help support that, I am going to. I do have ramp seeds in my house that I would like to get started and transplant out here, although it's late in the season, so I may have to save that for a project for next spring, as well as morel mushroom spawn, which I also want to spread out here. It's just a matter of determining what area is going to be best to put that in that's not going to be disturbed until I'm ready to go picking mushrooms. We're also going to do some, create a fire pit area down here, but all of that is for future decisions and planning. The previous owners, as I said, ran pigs and the cows through here, so it's fairly healthy, and I think that's also partly why it's relatively clear. So it's just a matter of figuring out where the potholes are and evening some of that out, and then just determining how much I want to plant this out. I do have a good source in the area. I don't know if any of you watch the Edible Acres videos. He is about 2 hours west of me. So every time he has a root sale, I tend to order something, and it's getting to be a bad habit because I still haven't planted most of what I've already bought. But that's a project for this week, now that the sun has finally decided to come out. Below me is what I originally called the Lower Pasture. And when I first purchased the property, my intention was that this would be where the orchard would be. It's lovely and flat. It's near the creek. It gets wonderful sunlight as the sun comes up over the mountains, so it gets direct sun most of the day. I even thought briefly about moving the garden down there. And then in December, we got this. Needless to say, I realized this area was not going to be usable for either of those intentions. I did have the hope of still maybe being able to put some fruit trees down in here, but let me show you what it looks like even now in late April. So given how wet it still is, I've decided that this is not going to be actively used land. I'm going to keep it primarily as a wetland. I'm not sure if you can hear, there are red-winged blackbirds out here. I have seen bald eagles in the area. They aren't here on the property, but I do have several very large dead trees at the back part of the property, which might provide good snags if they wanted to settle here. The creek there is stocked by the New York Environmental Department, so there are trout in that creek. I have to figure out if I am a capable fisherman enough to actually catch any of them. I do kind of want to build a small fishing area at one point. I do know that along the creek there are a number of beech trees, which I can add to my coppicing program so that I have additional wood that I can use for firewood if it's dried properly. At the moment, I have several dozen willow trees that I'm going to plant down there. I have a couple of river locusts to put in there as a nitrogen fixer. And I have high bush cranberry and low bush blueberry coming in that I'll plant all of those down there to start establishing more habitat. There are a number of old apple trees. I think you can see that one back there. There's about half a dozen old apple trees down there. And from the looks of the woodpecker holes on them, I believe they're all dead. But I don't want to cut them right now because I do know that there are birds using it for, at the very least, for perching in to come to my bird feeder on the house. I want to, again, go through the year, see who's using it, see if any of them come back, and maybe they just need some hard pruning to get rid of the dead wood and bring back some of these older apple trees that are down there. Mulberry trees would grow well down here, so I'll probably end up putting a couple of those down here. In some of the drier sections, I'll put some hazelnuts. The only things I am actively going to be trying to keep out of here are multiflora rose, because we do have a number of those along the embankment here, and I've been working on some of those up by the creek. And knock on wood, we do not currently have Japanese knotweed on the property, and I'm going to be very actively trying to keep that out, as it is such an aggressively invasive species. I have seen it completely take over a very large cemetery in Philadelphia that they are still actively working on trying to reclaim 10 years later. So we don't want either of those getting on the property. There are some other invasive species that, if managed properly, I will tolerate on the property. But for right now, I haven't seen any of them. That would be bittersweet Japanese honeysuckle. But again, it's a year of watching, learning, getting familiar with the property. And there we have it. This is where we're starting at from the beginning of the growing season of 2024. I have a million plants. I have flower gardens to start and flower gardens to clean up. I have the biggest vegetable patch either me or any of my parents have ever had to get under control. I've got fruit trees, and the bees come the beginning of May and the chickens come the end of the May, and somewhere in the course of the summer there's going to be turkeys and rabbits, and who knows where this journey is going to take us. I hope you'll come along with me. I'm very excited to document this, mostly for me and my family, but if you choose to come along, I would love to explore this with you as well. Again, thank you very much for coming along. I look forward to seeing you the next time. Compost comes tomorrow, so let's see where this goes. Take care, everybody.